1 second, very important phone call. Hey, Square Enix, I'd like to talk to you about making The Bouncer 2. Hello? Hello? I'll have to call him back. You wouldn't happen to have $200 million on you, would you? Over the years, the cost of making video games has increased a lot, from $500,000 in the 80s and 90s to hundreds of millions in the early 2000s with games like Grand Theft Auto. The cost of production only seems to be going up at this point, and now billions are poured into making video games every year, and sometimes that goes wrong. A commercial failure typically means that a game failed to meet sales expectations. It doesn't mean the game was poorly made or a bad game. In fact, a lot of these failures were critically acclaimed games. But what causes these huge investments to go so badly? Well, having a character that somehow looks worse than he did in a game 12 years ago is a good start. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was the fourth installment in the series, but things were rocky from the beginning. The original character models were just awful, and the absence of any X-Men characters was made worse with the line that characters are just functions in response to an interview question. Like, no, I'm not going to enjoy a game if you just switch out the main character and try to call it the same thing. Wait, they tried that too. So, we've got a pretty easy lesson here for whenever you're making a game. Don't piss off your fans. For a lot of people, the best part of playing Marvel is the character choices. Throughout the series, we've had a lot of fan favorites like Wolverine, Doctor Doom, Ryu from Streets, and this guy. Who is this? So, where are the X-Men? Well, there's a lot of theories about why the X-Men weren't included in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and most of them include corporate greed. You see, until 2019, the rights for all X-Men were still owned by Fox, so instead of making a game for the fans of the series, Disney decided that Fox couldn't have any free promotion by having the X-Men in a video game. Even with the absence of the X-Men, I really enjoyed the game for the 6 months you could still find people online to play it. The game has really good netcode, and the active assist system is great, but the game eventually boiled down to being a huge advertisement for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Speaking of advertising, if you make a game, you should think about doing that. The Bouncer was a 2001 game by Squaresoft. In The Bouncer, you play as one of 3 main characters: Sion, who looks like a slightly edgy version of Sora from Kingdom Hearts, Volt, the human pincushion, and Ko, the tribal tattoo man. Character design aside, why didn't The Bouncer sell? Well, it's a Square Enix game in the early 2000s that's not a Final Fantasy game. With games like Final Fantasy, you just get by on legacy. I see the words Final Fantasy, I buy it. Simple as that. Okay, it's not a foolproof system. The story revolves around Sion's girlfriend, Dominique Cross, who is secretly an ass-kicking robot, and if that seems like it came out of nowhere, well...
She is Duragon's dead sister.
What?
The game is a mix between an RPG and a fighting game. The game's combat uses ragdolls that let you do combos on some enemies, but spamming the same move works just as well. The game ends by defeating Dominique's evil brother, who's trying to blow things up with a miniature version of the Death Star. And if you play through the game multiple times, you can unlock secret versions of the final boss, which was honestly a really cool concept back in the PS2 days. APB, All Points Bulletin, was a game developed in 2010 by Real Time Worlds. Its lead developer, David Jones, helped create Grand Theft Auto, and together they made... Okay, I swear this is not Grand Theft Auto gameplay, you're just gonna have to trust me. Duke Nukem Forever was announced in 1997, but by the time the game came out in 2011, the people that wanted to play it didn't care anymore, and the people that were old enough to remember the Doom series were already cashing out their social security. Earthbound was a massive failure outside of Japan. Even though the series has increased in popularity due to the Smash Bros. Series, it did so badly in the States that the game's sequel, Mother 3, still hasn't received an American localization. You can still play the game in English through modded fan translations, but there's no official option. Okami by Clover Studio. We all had that friend in school who was really into this game, and you always thought, yeah, I'll definitely play that, and you never did. The game was later named one of the worst selling games to ever win a Guinness World Record, and that's at least partially my fault. The game's $20 on Steam, maybe I'll get it. From the creators of Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64, we've got Conker's Bad Fur Day, a game with profanity, drug use, and a lot of graphic violence. Why my mom bought me this game but wouldn't let me play GTA, I'll never understand, but it probably had something to do with the squirrel. The game's failure could have happened for a lot of reasons. The console's core audience didn't match the game, Nintendo's refusal to help with advertising, and coming out at the end of the console's lifespan spells death for most games. The story of the game is ultimately nonsense, but it does have a Matrix spoof at the end, so if you're interested in that sort of thing, it's pretty good. Double Fine Productions and its founder Tim Schafer make great games, but they've had trouble making games that make great money. A number of their games have had issues with development time, budget, and in the case of Brutal Legend, lawsuits. Their games are often critically acclaimed. Psychonauts is considered one of the best games ever made and has garnered a huge cult following over the years. It has a sequel slated for 2021, and hopefully it'll sell better than the first one did. So, you remember when I said that commercial failures could be amazing games? Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric was not that. Sonic games have always been about going fast, rolling around at the speed of sound, following your rainbow, that sort of thing. This one feels like they developed a child's puzzle game and slapped Sonic characters on top of it. The parts that do feel like a Sonic game are few and far between, and something is wrong with basically every animation Sonic does in this entire game. Especially how he jumps in these speed sections. This is not how jumping works. Ever. What is he doing with his hands? The characters don't feel like themselves either. They feel like played up versions of themselves written by a children's book author. Knuckles, for instance, he's never been the smart character, but in this game they've cranked him up to Kronk levels of incompetence. For instance, he takes multiple seconds to decide which direction is left in one of the early cutscenes. Tails, on the other hand, the left one in case you were wondering, has always been the smart character. But in this game they've turned him into some kind of Sheldon Cooper-esque character. I feel like I'm always waiting for a bazinga at the end of a sentence that's filled with big words that don't really fit a situation. Apart from being on the Wii U, people wouldn't have played this because the level design is bland, the game is a little glitchy, obviously not as much as Sonic 06, and it's just a generally disappointing Sonic title. Now that we've all learned a little bit more about game development, who wants to help me burn this money?